Hi, everyone. I've been a bit AWOL the last few weeks because I really desperately needed to take some time out. I didn't realize the impact of losing aid would have on me. And I should have realized, I know. I'm in this game of dealing with grief all the time and interviewing grief, so I should have known better. But in fact, I think just the fact that I just tried to keep everything going, all the balls up in the air and that, and I just got myself to a point of exhaustion and really needed to do some good time out and some healing. And I really feel like I'm back on track a bit more now, heading in the right direction. So I'm going to get season 4 underway for you very, very shortly. But before I get to that, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And this is to bring you a solo. So there's no guest I'm interviewing today. This is more about something I recently listened to from David Kessler. And he was talking about grief and how the loss of his own son shook his life to its very, very core. And he was supposedly the expert on grief and had been for many years. So just like me, and I imagine many of you, he wanted to lock himself inside of his house, pull the curtains, and basically wither away, because what was life without his son? I too remember asking myself that question. What was my life without my beautiful Tao? I didn't know. But the key word was life. I was still living. So even if I had to go on living, which I didn't seem to have much choice about, the question eventually became, what did I want my life to look like without Tao? And in order to get to that point, there were many, many things I needed to understand or have awareness of along the way. So what I want to share with you today are some of those insights I've gained around grief. Totally 100% my perspective, but I particularly wanted to cover the role of trauma in our grief, as that tends to play out in some really extraordinary ways that we may not be aware of. And I also want to run through with you the 6 key needs that David Kessler identifies of what everybody needs when they're grieving. Now, these are not stages of grief, although they will be stages that you go through at various times. But it's not like, those hard and fast stages like anger, denial, all of that stuff. This is quite different. And I think, when I listen to them, they've really made an impact on me. So I'm thinking if they made an impact on me, they will probably make an impact on you as well. And it's really good to have that understanding around them. So I'm going to be sharing those a bit later. What I wanted to get into first and foremost is like each and every grief experience we have is unique. It's unique as our fingerprints are. So, of course, there is going to be no one roadmap that's going to work for us all. And it's my hope that, when I do the podcast and share the stories that my guests bring and the incredible and valuable learnings I've mastered along the way, that helps you in some way to find the light or the tool that you need that will guide you. And I think that is what we all want, a guiding light to show us through this mess. That's certainly what I needed. I needed to try and make sense of it. My whole life was turned upside down. How was I going to move forward? Because nothing looked the same for me at all. And I think it's just probably the same for you, in your loss, with your beautiful loved one transitioning, life seems to look completely different and there's no roadmap for you. So I think what I've come to understand, and this is, I think, the most profound thing for me, is it's that everything I've experienced in my life to this day is what shapes and influences my grief. It's the good, the bad, the downright ugly, and even the indifferent. It all has an impact. And that is why I want you to understand the impact of trauma and grief, because very rarely does it not go hand in hand. Now, I hear you say, trauma? I haven't really had any of that. I had a great childhood. I seem to be really happy. I had loving, kind parents. And, what have I had that may be traumatic? But rather than thinking of trauma as something big that's really stopped your life in its shoes like this loss has, let's think of trauma as an emotional response to something that you have either witnessed, felt, experienced that has stayed with you. So that when you're triggered by something like whether it be a smell, a song, something somebody has said or somebody you've come in contact with or an experience, you are taken right back to a time of when you were young, where you felt that exact same way. So in effect, you've been triggered, and that takes you back to something that makes you feel that same way. And it really doesn't matter the size of the trauma. Like I said earlier, some people think trauma has to be some major life-changing event, yet it doesn't have to be that. It can be the stuff you felt as a kid that has shaped your life, like being told that you were never good at something, and how that has made you feel has stayed with you, especially if it's been reinforced over time. You've heard it again and again and again. And that can be either consciously or unconsciously. We don't always know what the triggers are within us. We just know how it makes us feel. And I think what happens when we experience grief is that it's so big and so impactful on our life that it's like lifting the lid of Pandora's box to your life, where things are no longer suppressed. And so you have all these emotions in addition to your grief that just seem to rise up out of nowhere. And it's things like fear, guilt, anger, heartache, but it's also the less talked about ones like feeling hopelessness and feeling unworthy or discouraged. And it really doesn't matter what the emotion is. If we have an imprint of it in our body, it's going to probably show up in some form. And the more we have of it in our body, i.e. the more we've experienced it or suppressed it, the deeper it is. And so it's going to come up more and more. Because you know that old saying, whatever you run from is surely going to pursue you. And I want to give you some examples of how that relates to my own life. Something I felt a lot of as a child and growing up was not being seen or heard. Whether that was true or not doesn't really matter because it's what I felt. I often felt isolated and abandoned, even though I was the youngest of 5. So it came as no surprise that when my beautiful child died, that I didn't look to others for too much guidance and that I wanted to be alone because that is what I knew and where I felt the safest. And there was also this feeling of having the things I love most taken away from me. And that in turn reinforced that I'm better off alone. So that led to what is the absolute use of talking about this because no one's going to hear me. Now that is not technically true. And I'm going to wrap a caveat around that as I am surrounded by and was surrounded by many beautiful friends and family who were there for me 100%. though the trauma of repeatedly having that feeling as a youngster made it my natural go-to in grief. And in fact, many of the people I was surrounded by when I was young are no longer with me. So they have passed on over the years. And so I don't have that feeling now that I did back in my younger days. And there was also that feeling of being numb. And I think by feeling numb, that stopped me from processing, from becoming overwhelmed by the enormity of what had happened to me. And that was that I'd lost my reason for living, my beautiful darling Kotal. I know in my head that what she had was simply an accident, that it was out of everybody's control. And if you tried to reenact it today, you probably wouldn't do a very good job of it. It was purely an accident. Though that didn't stop all those other insecurities coming into play. And what I've now come to understand is that this is what the complexity of grief is. All the other stuff we've experienced is woven into our grief. Because when I realized that I had made a phone call 2 minutes before her accident, my immediate go-to was that, oh my goodness, I had caused her accident. And there was no stopping me from not thinking and feeling that. And I just felt absolutely devastated by that. And it actually took me driving for 2 minutes down a road and consciously being aware of the distance you drive in 2 minutes to realize that actually, no, I hadn't caused her accident. You see, at the time, I didn't even realize she was driving, but I knew she picked up the phone call because she knew she had a separate ring from me. So she knew it was me calling. So, when I heard that piece of information, that was my immediate go-to. And I felt so, so guilty about that. I thought that I was the cause of her dying. Now, I've learned to turn it 100% on its head and think, how lucky am I that I got to speak to her just before she died, that I had this really quick, beautiful conversation and heard the excitement in her voice and knew I could hear the love in her. And I just am so grateful now that I did have that conversation. But you see, at the time, I couldn't go to that place. I had to work through it. And these are one of the things that I'm going to go through with you a bit later on. So that's the complexity of grief. And that's the uniqueness and why what works for one person doesn't work for another person. Why, just as there is no manual for raising a child, there is no manual for losing a child. There is no manual for losing a spouse, a partner, a loved one in whatever capacity they were to you. And so just as I thought it was enough for me to lose child, that was a one biggie in my life and that nothing could top that, I was unprepared for losing Adrian 5 years later. And that was because, I had opened my heart up done a lot of healing, opened my heart up. I met this incredible person who I was excited to explore life together with. It seemed that we just instantly clicked. We instantly had a connection. We were on the same page. We wanted the same things. And then instantly, he was taken away from me as well. Totally in something that nobody could control. And I thought that going through what I did with Tal, I would be prepared for this. But you see, I wasn't. I wasn't prepared for this either. And what came back to me And what ripped my heart out was, again, what I mentioned earlier, that all the things and the people I love get taken away from me. I obviously still had a lot of emotions wrapped up in that I still needed to process, because losing Adrian brought it all crashing home to me. All of those emotions. There was no escaping them, no suppressing them, no denying them. They were there for me to face head on. But the beauty of that this time round was that in dealing with the transition of Tal, I knew 100% that I could get through this. I could get through losing Adrian as well. I didn't know how long it was going to take or what I needed to do, but I knew that one truth. And so I allowed myself to surrender to another of life's lessons, and I didn't shut down or close my heart off, and I didn't go numb. So what I did was allow myself to ugly cry, and I ugly cried a lot. And I let myself do that, and I let myself be heartbroken, and I let myself feel everything I needed to feel around him. And it didn't feel fair at all. In fact, it felt the exact opposite. I just felt hugely gutted. And, I did ask, why me? Wasn't it enough that I'd lost my beautiful, darling girl Tal? That I now had to lose Aid as well? But, there was no answers to that. So I quickly gave that away. The reason I give you these examples is so that you can start to see, if you haven't already, how your grief will never look like your partner's, your child's, your friends, your mum or dad's grief, or any other grief you've experienced previously. It will always take on a life of its own, and it will appear in whatever way it appears and needs to be processed. So there is no need to tell yourself, why can't I be more like Sarah in the way she deals with this? Or why can't I just accept it like Mum has? I wish I had her strength. Michael seems to have gotten over this. Why am I still feeling like I want to cry every 5 minutes? Believe me, you are here and now, and that shows that you have strength. Even if you don't feel it, you do have an incredible strength within you. You have an incredible wisdom within you, and you are so brave and courageous to be searching for that way out of it all. It's just that you need to do your grief and healing in your own way, because nobody has had your experiences, only you. And your grief right here and now is likely to be playing out based on these experiences. You may even be feeling an overwhelming fear of it happening to somebody else, or be feeling stuck. Where do you go from now? Yeah, you can't even think, let alone know which way you need to move forward. Or you could be angry for no obvious reason, or feeling like this is never going to end. What I want you to most notice is that when that initial hard, gut-wrenching pain ends and you are left with something else, whether that be emptiness, rage, fear, or any other emotion, that is your trauma voice talking. And I want you to take heart knowing that when you are able to recognize this, that you now have the opportunity to acknowledge another layer of you that exists, that needs to be healed, and that you can heal that also. Also know that there is absolutely no timeline on healing. And healing, by the way, simply means that you have reached a place where you can function again with day-to-day life, following whatever event it is that you've been through. It's not that you're over it or still don't need to heal in other areas of your life. I believe healing is often incremental and a lifelong endeavor, and we're never going to escape it. It's just that the more we go through, the more that is revealed to us, and the more we realize, okay, don't want that anymore. It's going to take a hike. And so we choose to heal it. And that's why I want to now move into these 6 key things that I've learned from David Kessler, and they are his learnings. They are not my learnings. But what I have done is paraphrase them and used, some of my own examples to help you understand them. But they are really good. So let's get into that. Oh, no, just before we do that, please know that you don't have to do this on your own, and that it's really useful to find somebody that you feel safe with, whether that be a friend or a counselor, a grief coach, or some other type of mentor. The most important thing is that you feel safe with that person so that you can express yourself without judgment. If you want to do it on your own, like I tend to do, then that is totally okay as well. But some of the things I'm going to be talking about or what you're experiencing about, you may need support with. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing is to have your pain witnessed. Your life as you knew it has been turned on its head, and that hurts like crazy. And you are allowed to show that you are hurting. You don't have to be brave. You don't have to be putting a face on this incredible hurt that you are experiencing. And the purpose of doing this is not for anybody to make it better for you or to fix it, because nobody can do that. This is simply for you to be able to show your pain and have it seen. The next thing is it's okay for you to express how you feel. Okay, now this is not about what your head is thinking or what you think you should be feeling or how you think your grief should look. Maybe you don't even know what you're feeling, but what I want you to be aware of is that it's what your body is feeling. Now, the problem is that we've spent many, many years being conditioned to how we should act in certain situations. And so what we immediately do when we start to feel these feelings, our brain goes to, okay, this is this situation. And in this situation, what you need to do is just put on a strong, brave front and carry on. And, so we're pushing down all these feelings to show others how we think that we need to be seen. But the problem with that is that we never get good at expressing and recognizing our feelings because we're quickly pushing them down and suppressing them. So in your own grief right here and now, what I want you to do is to be really aware of just sitting with your body and feeling what it is feeling. Maybe for you, it's that guttache, that heart-wrenching ache in your chest, or maybe it's your head throbbing and just feeling numb, or maybe you just ache all over, have no strength in your body whatsoever. And I want you to feel how grief is taking its toll on you, and sit with that. Don't try to make sense of it. Don't put it into your head and intellectualize it. Just sit with it, feel it. Okay. And that's simply what you need to do. Just feel them. The next is a biggie because it's very rarely that we go through without feeling guilt. It often goes hand in hand, grief and guilt. And this is you working through all the what ifs. Now, this is where I think you may need to have a safe person who won't mind you voicing your what ifs over and over again to be with you as you do this, because you need a sounding board. And it's the, if only I had left the office 5 minutes earlier, or if only I hadn't yelled at her last night. If only I hadn't gone on that business trip. If only I had taken 5 minutes away from what I was working on to give them my time and attention. And what if I had just, and you fill in the gap. Allow yourself to work through all of these what ifs. What would be the difference of leaving the office 5 minutes earlier? What difference would that have made? How could that have impacted things differently? You need to sit with that. You need to work through it. You need to think, oh, well, maybe it would have made a difference, but maybe it would not have. Or how would not have yelling at her last night change what had happened? And keep doing this as often and as long as you need to. Think of the example I gave earlier of thinking that my phone call had caused my daughter's accident. Yet now I'm able to treasure that phone call. And that's what going through this exercise can do. And maybe you won't get to that other side of it quickly or easily as I did. I don't think I got to it easily. It took me a bit of time, but I'm glad I did go through it. But just keep going through all those what ifs, working through that guilt until you reach a place of understanding and acceptance. And maybe, just maybe, there was nothing you could have done to change this devastating outcome. And that's okay. And maybe, just maybe, there is no answer to the whys that you've been asking. And that is okay also. The fourth thing I want to talk to you about, the fourth thing you need to work through, is to recognize where you may have trauma showing up and playing out in your grief. Now, it's that empty feeling. Have you ever felt that before? And if so, when? Think about when that happened and what happened then and why you may be feeling it now, because that's come to the surface for some reason. And remember, you don't have to do this on your own, as it may bring up some really painful memories and loads of hurt that you may need some support working through. So I want to make sure that you are well supported. But it's after that initial pain of losing that beautiful person in your life, after that sort of eases off a bit, and you are left with all these other feelings, that anger coming out of nowhere, or that emptiness, or that not feeling worthy. It's all those sorts of things. Right. Number 5 is take each and every little step you are making and acknowledge it. Why is this important? Because sometimes we get so mired in our grief and the whole experience that we just simply do not see how far we have come. And you need to be able to do that. So it's the little things like, and often, now I'm just going to go back a step. So it's not a big aha moment of moving through grief. It's often those little number of steps and adjustments that you've made along the way. So it's like being able to get yourself out of bed when all you've wanted to do previously is hide yourself under the cover and for everything just to go away. So it's getting yourself out of bed, maybe taking that first shower, maybe getting back to a normal eating pattern, however that may look for you, whether you've been not eating and now you're able to have like breakfast again or lunch. It's allowing yourself to go out and have that cup of tea or coffee or spend that time with that person that you really trust to be with and being able to chat or just sit in silence. For me, a biggie was being able to go to the supermarket. I dreaded going to the supermarket. Supermarkets are places where you always see the people that you least want to see. And when you're looking so, well, I think when you're so battered and worn, you don't have the energy to face those people. So for me, going to the supermarket was a biggie. And indeed, I did see those people I didn't want to see. And I even had people that didn't want to see me, didn't know how to deal with my pain and my grief. And so they turned away and walked away from me, and that hurt like hell too. So it's all those experiences. But I want you to acknowledge each and every step that you've been through and the progress that you've made. And it doesn't even matter if you've slipped back once, twice, 100 times. That does not matter in the slightest. What I'm talking about is those little steps that you've taken forward, getting yourself dressed, caring about what you look like, washing your face, doing your hair, maybe even putting a little bit of makeup on. Doesn't matter what it is. Just take note of each and every one of those and acknowledge them, because those are the signs that show you how far you have come. Okay? By the way, slipping back is my MO. I'm great at doing that. I do really, really well. I'm on track. I'm dedicated. Yep, this is how it's going to look going forward. And then I sabotage it. And I fall right back down to often where I was at the start again and have to pick myself up and dust myself off and carry on again. But that's okay. So you're not alone in that if that's you. The final thing I want to talk about is the need. What it is that you need to do to find meaning again in your life. Not in anyone else's life, but in your life following this event. Maybe it's simply to acknowledge the pain you've been through head on, or to do something to honor your loved one. Like I follow this beautiful lady who's taken to doing the most incredible art, and now she's gifted a park bench with a plaque on it in memory of her gorgeous son. And maybe that's how you want to honor your loved one. Or maybe it's like me, doing a podcast, interviewing people and that. But let me tell you, it's a lot of hard work, and so I don't recommend it. You have to be pretty tenacious to do what I'm doing, and sometimes you simply don't have the energy to do that. And it doesn't even have to be something big. It can be something little. Maybe it's just that you choose how you're going to celebrate Christmas this year. You're going to give it a completely different look so that you can honor your loved one in a different way that's not so painful for you. It's just, what does your life need to look like now that has meaning for you? Yeah, it's a biggie, isn't it? And just think about things that are driven from your heart. Really feel your heart in this, because when you come from a heart-centered place, that's when you know you're doing the right thing for you. Okay. And again, it's not about size. It's about, if I have to go on living, which I do, how do I want that to look for me? So those are the 6 needs that we all should be going through in our grief. So let's recap them for you. The first one was, you deserve to have your pain witnessed. The second one, it's okay to express how you feel. The third one, work through your guilt, your what ifs. Then we headed to the fourth one. It's about healing old wounds, aka where is the trauma showing up? The fifth one is pain and love go hand in hand. So face the pain and accept and acknowledge your wins, all those little steps that you were taking to work your way through this grief. And the last one was and is, how can you find meaning from this? Think about these needs as they are all important. And it's important that you move through all of them. You can't skip any. And it doesn't matter that they happen in that order. They can happen in any order. And you may go through them again and again. And lastly, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen in, for allowing me to share my perspective of grief and loss and hope and healing. I know I do it a little bit differently from others. I know I don't focus on a lot of the heart-wrenching stuff because I've been blessed with being gifted seeing many, many beautiful aspects to my grief experiences. And it's always my hope to walk alongside of you in your grief. I don't want to make it right for you or help you get over it or have you accept it. That's for you to choose and do in your own time, in your own way. What I want to do is walk alongside of you, interview these incredible guests that I have the privilege of meeting, hearing their stories, having them share those with you so that they may be a guiding light for you in the darkness. And that you know that this pain won't last forever, that eventually over time, the energy will change. And that you are loved. I want you to know that. I want you to know that you're loved, that you're worthy of having a life filled again with hope and happiness. Because that is the beautiful side of grief. As always, if you've got anything to share with me, I would love to hear from you. It doesn't have to be anything at all. It can be the nothingness of your grief. What's not going well, what is going well, just what is for you at the moment. It can be exactly what you need it to be. But if you feel you need to share it, then I would be honored to be able to receive it and to read it. Because I know what a big deal that is. So until then, I'm going to send you loads of love and hugs from my beautiful home here in New Zealand, where spring is here. And I just so love looking at the trees, getting all their leaves again and all the spring flowers, the sunshine coming. And this is a beautiful, beautiful time of year for me. And I love it. And I love you too. So take good care.